Well, Southwest, if you know any of its history, you know that it kind of has this this basis of being the Love airline. They fly out of Love Field. Their stock ticker symbol is LUV. So Southwest is the Love airline. They had built all this marketing around the idea of being the Love airline. And part of being the Love airline was when businessmen, businessmen is what they had in mind, when they are flying on these short flights from Houston to Dallas to San Antonio, back and forth, that at the end of the day, they just want, a beautiful woman to look at. They don't want to get their drink and peanuts from a male flight attendant. So Southwest Airlines argues that this is a BFOQ. This is our whole business. Our business is based around the idea of hiring female flight attendants. But what the court says is, that's not enough. That's not enough. It must go to the very essence of the business. It can't be simply that you'll make more money if you are allowed to discriminate, that it matches your marketing plan better. Discrimination fits what it is that you want to market. You can't even say that well, our customers will only approve of female flight attendants. Instead, it must go to the essence of the company, meaning if they're not allowed to discriminate, the company goes out of business, in essence. And so, of course, what did we see? Well, the court rejected the BFOQ defense because it was clearly disparate treatment and it did not go to the essence of the business. And we know that because Southwest started hiring male flight attendants and it was no big deal. And now they have, thousands of male flight attendants. And when you get on a plane and you have an all-male flight crew, it's not that unusual. So the standard of proving a BFOQ is pretty high, especially for cases of sex discrimination. So that's disparate treatment. Plaintiff proves the prima facie case. Defendant must respond with a defense, either LNDR or BFOQ, and then the plaintiff can prove pretext. Disparate impact is slightly different. Disparate impact, as we said, this is where an employer has a policy that's neutral on its face, but has a negative impact on a protected category. You can recognize a disparate impact claim because it applies to groups of people and not individuals. A disparate treatment claim involves treating people differently based on their membership in a protected class. Discriminating against individuals. A disparate impact claim is not that you discriminated against me, but you discriminated against everybody like me. So it is a claim that arises out of group discrimination. Now, disparate impact regulates what we call screening devices. A screening device is anything that you are going to use to deselect certain candidates in your hiring process. A test, a mental ability test, a personality test. It could be education, just an objective criteria. Do you have a bachelor's degree or not? Do you have a high school degree or not? It could be an interview. All of these screening devices, those things that we use to screen out candidates, all fall within disparate impact law. And so what disparate impact law says, there's a screening device in play, and this screening device is unfairly discriminating against a certain group of individuals. Now, disparate impact was not included in the original statute, Title VII. Instead, it came out of the common law, the Supreme Court, in this case of Griggs versus Duke Power. In this case, Mr. Griggs wanted to go to work for Duke Power, an energy company based in North Carolina. Now, Griggs was black, and when he applied for a job, Duke said they could not hire him because they had put a new requirement into place that said all employees must have a high school diploma. All employees. It's a neutral policy, right? Everyone has to have a high school diploma. Mr. Griggs didn't have a high school diploma and therefore wasn't eligible to apply for the job. In fact, anyone who didn't have a high school diploma could not apply for the job. Why is it discrimination? Well, in North Carolina in the 1960s, the percentage of blacks without high school diplomas was much larger than the percentage of whites without high school diplomas. And so when you put that policy into place, you are going to disproportionately impact African Americans, those who want to apply but don't have that minimum requirement. Now you're going to say, well, they have to have a way of finding the best people, and that sounds like I'm just trying to find the best employees. And that's what Duke argued. Like, this is not about discrimination, this is about finding the best possible employees. The problem for Duke, however, was that when they put the new rule into place, and not coincidentally, it was put into place after Title VII. When they put the rule into place, they grandfathered in everybody who was already working there, those with high school diplomas and those without. You all got to keep your jobs. Well, what the plaintiffs in this case determined was that when you evaluated those employees, it turned out that those without high school diplomas did just as well as those with high school diplomas on the job. And so the argument that this is a necessity for my business did not work, because we know by looking at the evaluations that having a high school diploma doesn't make you better at doing the jobs that you're looking for. So, disparate impact. Now, there's several methods for establishing a prima facie case of disparate impact. In order to prove your prima facie case, ordinarily the plaintiff will use statistics, which is to say a certain group of individuals are being excluded by a screening device in a disproportionate manner. Now, the rule of thumb that we use is called the 4/5 rule, or the 80% rule. And what this rule of thumb says is that the plaintiff can prove a prima facie case by showing that protected employees do not fare at least 80% as well as as employees outside of the protected class. So 80%. 80% is just a rough figure. There's nothing to say that if you prove 75%, you won't prove the prima facie case, or that you can't overcome a prima facie case with 80%. But it's sort of a rule of thumb to follow, meaning people must be doing at least 4/5 as well, or there is something else coming into play. And that something else would be illegal discrimination. The selected rate of the protected class should be at least 80% of the selection rate of the other class. I'll post another video on this, but right now let's just look at an example. This is how it works. That say 1,500 applicants apply for a job. The job requires a test. There are 1,000 men that applied and 500 women applied for the job. 100 of the 500 women passed the test. 300 men passed the test, 300 of 1,000. So, well, I don't know, is that unlawful discrimination or not? Well, how do we figure it? Well, we look at the percentages. We know that 20% of women passed the test, and we know that 30% of men passed the test. And then we compare those rates. And in this case, comparing the ratio of 0.2 to 0.3 shows 66%. meaning because the percentage is less than 80%, something appears to be there. That something is going on in which we have 30% of the men passing the test, but only 20% of the women passing the test. So the prima facie case, again, it doesn't mean that you win. It doesn't mean that you prove discrimination. It's simply going to shift the burden to the defendant to overcome that presumption of discrimination. The burden is going to shift to the defendant employer. Now, disparate impact can be broad. Non-scored objective criteria can also create disparate impact, say interviews. Subjective criteria may be subject to disparate impact analysis as well. In fact, the important thing for you to know is that disparate impact can exist even where there is no intent, meaning the rule was not put into place with the intent of discriminating against individuals. The rule was not intended to discriminate, but yet it had that effect. What does this mean for you as future business managers? Monitor your screening devices. Make sure that your screening devices are not having this sort of disproportionate impact. You can do the analysis as well as anyone else, and therefore you can tell whether you have a screening device in effect that's having a disproportionate impact. Disparate impact is what scares employers when they go to hire individuals. Why? Because even if in their heart they think they're not discriminating, if the screening device is discriminating, then they could be liable for unlawful discrimination. After the plaintiff makes the prima facie case, proves the statistics, the burden shifts to the employer. And the employer's got two responses. First of all, the employer can attack the plaintiff's statistics. Those of you who have taken statistics or studied statistics in your other classes, you know that statistics can be manipulated and changed. The employer can attack the plaintiff's statistics and say, no, that's not measuring what you think it's measuring. Sometimes these cases are not so clear-cut as the example I just gave. So that's the best defense. Now, the employer can also show that the screening device is a business necessity. So business necessity is not BFOQ. Don't get them confused. BFOQ only applies to disparate treatment. Business necessity only applies to disparate impact. So what is business necessity? Business necessity essentially establishes that I can do better. It's necessary for my business for me to have this screening device, even if it has this discriminatory impact. That the screening device is a business necessity. Business necessity is a lower standard than BFOQ. It doesn't have to go to the essence of the business. It simply shows that the business will be better. Not just make more money, but be a better business if we use the screening device. If I give a test, some sort of general mental ability test, and it turns out that those who do well on the test make good employees, make the best employees, then even if that test has this disparate impact, if women do better on the test than men at a disproportionate rate, I can still argue that I'm using a neutral device to find the best possible candidate and therefore overcome the presumption. Of course, the plaintiff then has its ability to respond, to rebut that the defendant's defense. The plaintiff can show that there's a less discriminatory alternative. There's another test. There's another screening device that can do the same thing but without the illegal discrimination. If I give a test and men pass the test at a much lower rate than women, and I can show that the women who do well make the best employees, A plaintiff could prove another test exists that also gives you the best employees, but does not have that discriminatory effect.